My Delight in What I Fear was said by Shirley Jackson. Who was Shirley Jackson? Shirley Jackson was an American novelist. She wrote horror stories. Her best-known story is The Lottery, and another famous story by her is The Haunting of Hill House, which is made into a movie numerous times according to the ShirleyJacksonBio.org. This story has become an American classic throughout the U.S. Shirley Jackson revolutionized how writers wrote horror and abnormal psychologies over time. Shirley Jackson was a very important icon in writing. She influenced some of your favorite writers, including my own. Shirley Jackson was a very experienced writer in my favorite genre. The life of Shirley Jackson and what she has done for the literature world is very influential. I will be talking about her life, her work, and how she influenced the American culture. First, I will talk about her life. She was born on December 14, 1919. Her birth name was Shirley Hardy Jackson, and she was born in San Francisco. Her father was Leslie Jackson, who was born in England, and her mother was Geraldine Bugby Jackson, who was also born in San Francisco. 2 years after she was born, her brother Barry was born. And 2 years after his birth, they moved to Burlingame, California. As soon as she could start writing, she began to write stories. At the age of 12, she won her first poetry contest. The poem that won this contest was called The Pine Tree. During her high school year, her family decided to move to Rochester, New York. She attended Brighton High School and graduated in the top quarter of her 60 classmates. She enrolled at the University of Rochester in a liberal arts program, but withdrew after a year and decided to go home. She continued to write from there. After dropping out for 2 years, she enrolled in school at Syracuse University, where she met her soon-to-be-husband, Stanley Edgar Hyman. After graduating, they got married. After marriage, they decided to move to New York City. Stanley got a job as the assistant editor of the New Republic. Shirley Jackson continued to write. Shirley Jackson's story, My Life with R.H. Macy, was her first nationally published story on December 22, 1941. In 1942, their first son was born. His name was Lawrence. And she continued to keep writing, even though she had a life with a child now. Stanley became the staff writer of New Yorker, and he continued to publish stories for his wife. Stanley was offered a job at Bennington College in Vermont, and they decided to move there. After moving there, in 1945, they welcomed their second child, Joanne. Her story, The Lottery, was published in the New Yorker, and she became famous in 1948, according to the New York Times obituary of Shirley Jackson. In 1948, they also had their third child, Sarah. And by then, The Lottery has brought in Shirley Jackson much fame, more than ever. Her stories continued to be published in papers and magazines. 3 years after Sarah, their son Barry was born. Her career was soaring. She was very successful. The Lottery was made into a television movie, and she wrote about her children and her family in the book The Life Among the Savages in 1953. In 1956, her story, The Bird's Nest, was made into a movie called Lizzie. After that, she wrote another book about her family called Raising Demons. In 1961, she won an Edgar Allan Poe Award for her story, Louisa Please. In 1962, she wrote her best-selling novel, We Have Always Lived in the Castle. In 1965, she received the Arnott's Pioneer Medal for Astounding Achievement at Syracuse University, but could not attend because of her illness. She died on August 8, 1965, according to the Shirley Jackson bio. Now, I will be talking about some of her literature masterpieces. The first book I will talk about is We Have Always Lived in the Castle. And this is a copy of the book. This is about two sisters named Mary Cat and Constance Blackwood. They live with their uncle Julian. They used to have more family, but they all passed away because of somehow some arsenic got put in the sugar and they all were killed. Their cousin Charles shows up and Mary Cat knows he's up to no good. And she must protect her sister from his harm. The second book is The Haunting of Hill House. This story tells about 4 people. Dr. Montague, who is a scholar, his assistant Theodora, Eleanor, who has experience with ghosts and poltergeists, and Luke, who is the heir to owning the Hill House. They stay up the night and encounter paranormal activities. As the paranormal activities continue, the ghost decides to make a plan to make one of the victims of their torments one of their own. The third story is Shirley Jackson's most famous story, which is Lottery. This lottery is not your average lottery. It is put on by Mr. Summers. Every year, people put their names in a box. This box holds the destiny of over 300 people. Someone will receive a black dot on their name from the box and have to be stoned to death as a sacrifice. Now I will talk about how she influenced the culture. The first way she influenced the culture is her different genres. At times, she would write humorous, witty tales. Other times, she would write about murder, betrayal, and hauntings. Her main 2 genres were comedy and horror, which are completely opposite of each other. The second way is her choice of wording. She would describe things so vividly, it'd be like you were actually there, which is totally incredible. She also picked words that you'd never expect to go together, but when she did, it made so much more sense. Her wording and description was phenomenal and made it feel like you were truly there. Third way that she has influenced people is to never give up on what you love. When she experienced her children and getting married and such, people thought it would be impossible for her to write, but she still continued to. By raising 4 kids, she still managed to write stories, novels, and poems. She wrote about her children, even inspired her in 2 of her books. When she fell ill, she still wrote. Normally, when people fall ill, they don't normally do what they love, but Shirley still continued. She continued to write up until her death. Shirley Jackson has influenced many people, including myself. The life of Shirley Jackson and what she did for the literature world was inspirational. Shirley Jackson always wrote. She could write since she could spell her name. Stories and poems were published by her husband and published into the New Yorker and other famous newspapers and magazines. She had 4 children who inspired her to write, and 3 of her most famous stories are We Have Always Lived in the Castle, The Haunting of Hill House, and The Lottery. Shirley Jackson has always been writing. She has inspired many people. She has also inspired many people to follow their dreams and never to give up on what they love. I delight in what I fear was said by Shirley Jackson. She wrote about things that scared her, ghosts and her children, but she loved to write about it anyway. Shirley Jackson has influenced the American culture.